Disney is a company that's known for its romantic love stories, which is why it's always surprised me that Mufasa and Sarabi never really got any backstory to their relationship. They were just this seemingly perfect depiction of a king and queen who genuinely cared for their people. Well, what if I told you that there are a few fan theories and stories describing Mufasa and Sarabi's relationship as well as how they ended up together? Be warned though, some of these stories are pretty shocking. Now, as with most Disney theories, it all had to start somewhere, and in this case it would seem like it all started when Mufasa and Sarabi were possibly betrothed to each other. This is actually the theory that most sources and wikis consider to be canon, or at least as close to canon as we'll get. Like most royal marriages throughout history, some fans seem to think that Mufasa and Sarabi's relationship wasn't one that started out of love. Now, that doesn't mean that the two lions didn't love each other, because they clearly did, and that was very obvious in The Lion King. All it would mean is that even if they didn't love each other to start out, they probably would have been set up to be married regardless. In most royal marriages throughout history, two members of separate royal families would be promised to each other in marriage as a way of solidifying a bond or alliance between the two royal kingdoms. Well, what if Disney's animal royalty acted in the same way? This theory suggests that Sarabi was chosen by Mufasa's father, who was the king at the time, and the two were told that they had to get married through some sort of ceremony. Luckily for Sarabi and Mufasa, the theory suggests that the two lions did actually care for each other, and the relationship was genuine as much as it was ceremonial. In other words, even though in this case Sarabi and Mufasa were betrothed to each other, it's clear that their love for each other was very real and very strong. But wouldn't it be nice to consider the idea that the two lions only became life partners because they were fated to be together? According to the next theory, Mufasa and Sarabi met each other after a very clear and vivid dream that the future king supposedly had. You see, this theory suggests that while Mufasa was still a relatively young prince in the Pridelands, around the age of 3, which would make him a teenager in lion years, Mufasa had a dream. This dream was so realistic and unlike anything that Mufasa had ever experienced before. Now, it's important to note that in the world of The Lion King, characters have seen visions and gotten messages from the universe on multiple occasions, just like when Rafiki was talking to the wind in The Lion King 2 and realized that Kiara and Kovu's love could mend a wound that had been festering in the Pridelands for too long. So it's not that far-fetched of an idea that Mufasa may have had a dream that told him he would meet his future wife soon. Continuing with the theory, after having such a vivid dream, Mufasa wondered what it could mean. All of his questions were answered for him one day when he was out hunting with his companions. As he was stalking his prey, Mufasa noticed something in the distance that caught his eye. According to the theory, what Mufasa was noticing was a young lioness. She was lying underneath a tree, and even from a distance, Mufasa got a strange feeling as if he had seen her before. Mufasa supposedly approached the lioness, and as the setting sun created a beautiful backdrop behind them, the pair introduced themselves. Sarabi revealed to Mufasa that she belonged to a neighboring pride, and according to the theory, it was then that Mufasa realized who she was. She was the lioness from his dream. Mufasa supposedly asked Sarabi if she wished to be friends, and after Sarabi agreed, the two just stared into each other's eyes for what seemed like hours. By the time they broke their gaze, the sun had fully set and the sky was illuminated by countless stars. For Mufasa, the theory suggests that it was like living out the dream that he had had, which is probably because he was brave enough to say what he said next. Mufasa asked Sarabi if she would stay with him forever, and surprisingly enough, the young lioness must have been feeling the same connection that Mufasa felt because she said yes. The lions' love grew and grew until eventually they got married and became the new king and queen of Pride Rock. Now, I know that this theory is a little out there, but it actually comes from a Polish storybook that's based on a bunch of Disney stories. So even though it's not technically canon, it's totally plausible. Plus, you have to admit it's a sweet tale. As nice a story as that fateful night would have been to tell their children, though, there's still one more theory that might be even more heartwarming. Have you ever heard the theory of how Sarabi wound up with the Pridelanders in the first place? You see, according to another version of the theory, Sarabi wasn't born into the Pridelands, and yet she still managed to become one of the best queens that Pride Rock ever had. But in order to understand how she got there, we're going to have to go all the way back to the beginning. The theory starts by suggesting that Sarabi was born into an unknown pride that was in control of a territory far beyond the Pridelands. The main reason this pride was supposedly so unknown was because it had just been established by the dominant male lion in the group, who just so happened to be Sarabi's father. That's right, this would mean that Sarabi was the princess of this new pride, and even though the first few months of her life may have been lonely as the only cub, it wasn't long before she made her first lifelong friend. According to the theory, shortly after Sarabi was born, another lion lioness cub was born into the pride who was named Serafina. As you know, Serafina and Sarabi would become very close friends. However, this still doesn't explain how Sarabi wound up in the Pridelands. Well, according to this theory, Sarabi's happy life with her family didn't last as long as you'd hope. And when she was only a year or two old, she was forced to flee her home after a devastating hyena attack. The theory suggests that the attack happened out of nowhere and not a single member of Sarabi's pride was ready for it. Still, the lions would have known the importance of protecting their young during the attack, and because of that, Sarabi's mother told her and Serafina to hide as best they could. Eventually, though, hiding wasn't enough. As the battle raged on, it became clear to Sarabi that her pride was getting overwhelmed, and as young as she may have been, the theory suggests that she knew there was little hope. In one final effort to save the children's lives, the adult lions of Sarabi and Serafina's pride told them to run as far as they could, and they fought off the hyenas just long enough for them to get away. The theory suggests that Sarabi made it out of the cave that they were hiding in, and that she and her friend both escaped the danger of the hyena attack before breaking down. The pain that Sarabi and Serafina would have felt after losing their family would have been unbearable for the young cubs, but it's likely that they knew they couldn't stay in one place for long as their instinct to survive kicked in. Thus, the cubs continued to wander into territory unknown to them. According to the theory, they wandered through the desert and through the jungle before finally finding a place that they hoped to call their home. This would be the first time that Sarabi ever set her eyes on the Pridelands. The two cubs supposedly made their way into the Pridelands before they noticed that they were not alone. Sarabi stopped moving when she noticed another young lion about the same age as she was, playing in the tall grass. Sarabi and Serafina wanted to approach, but according to the theory, they noticed that there were multiple full-grown lionesses standing guard near the other cub. The adult lionesses noticed the two strange cubs and slowly approached them. Sarabi and her friend made sure to stay as still as possible. Luckily for them, the first of the lions to reach them was the young cub, who introduced himself as none other than Mufasa. That's right, Mufasa was the first lion that they ever spoke to outside of their pride. The theory continues with Mufasa introducing himself to Sarabi, who then explains to him the trials and tribulations that she and Serafina had just gone through. Mufasa clearly felt a connection with Sarabi, and without hesitation, he asked them to both follow him. It's suggested that Mufasa brought Sarabi and Serafina to his father, King Ahadi, who heard their story and welcomed them both into the Pridelands as new members of his pride. From that point on, Mufasa and Sarabi would have grown up alongside each other, and the more time they spent together, the closer they became. Their feelings for each other continued to grow over time, and eventually the theory suggests that they started a relationship, and as you know, their relationship would become a lifelong partnership for the two lions. As time went on, Mufasa and Sarabi would grow to become the new king and queen of the Pridelands, which was likely when they officially decided to start a family together. Now, I like this theory and backstory for Sarabi because it not only explains where the great queen of Pride Rock got her strength and charisma, but also makes her full story really epic. I mean, if this theory is accurate, that means that Sarabi went from being a princess of a new pride to a rogue cub with nothing but her friend to help her survive in unknown lands, to a newly adopted member of a pride, all the way to becoming the queen of the kingdom and leader of the hunting party. Now that is awesome. Not to mention, it also sheds more light on Mufasa and how welcoming he likely was to new animals in the Pridelands, especially those who may be in dire need, which is exactly the way a great king should be. So, out of all these theories, which do you think most accurately depicts how Mufasa and Sarabi met and, more importantly, fell in love? Or do you have a theory of your own? Be sure to let me know in the comments below.